Hi, Ozzy here, with a slightly different kind of video today. I'm going to be doing a short reading. Um, every once in a while, one comes across a post or a comment under a video that is so well articulated and so well expresses your own view of a situation or a question that you wish you'd written those words yourself. And I had that experience this morning. There's a show I participate in most Friday evenings called Deeper Than Dogma. And this week, tonight, we're going to be asking the question, can you be a religious moderate while remaining consistent with your religion? And the announcement for this hangout and show went out this morning. And immediately following that, there was a very well thought out comment that was posted underneath it. And it so closely approximates my own views that I thought it'd be hard for me to improve upon this. And I thought I'd like other people to hear it. So I contacted the person who wrote the comment, a person by the name of Will to Power, someone who participates in the Google Plus community in the Great Debate, someone I've actually spoken to in Hangouts. And I asked if I could have permission to read out the text of his comment, and he was gracious enough to say yes, and also allowed me some editorial license so that I could trim out a few bits, little parenthetical comments that would, well, so as to smooth readability. So what I'm going to do now is just read you his comment in full and put forward for your consideration. The question, again, is, can you be a moderate, a religious moderate, while remaining consistent with your religion? And here's what he wrote, quote, "I'll throw down the gauntlet. Moderates and liberals in particular are worse than inconsistent. They are insincere. In principle, it may be possible for a man to believe the central tenets of the faith, as articulated in the Nicene Creed, for example, and still be a theological and cultural liberal. But if one accepts the creeds and the biblical canon in a serious capacity, it is difficult, almost impossible, to ignore the huge number of theological shadows cast by them. Historic Christianity comes with an anthropology, much of which runs entirely counter to modern liberal conceptions of what it means to be a person, how one is to relate to one's own body, or how one is to relate to the other persons. And nowhere is this clash more evident than in the sexual sphere. Likewise, it comes with a conception of cosmic justice, authoritarian and retributive in nature. That also clashes with our modern sensibilities. This should not be controversial. Indeed, this is evident from a plain reading of the biblical texts, as well as a reading of their critical commentaries, particularly those from the patristic period, which informed the early Christian vision of reality down on through the centuries. There is a historic, theological nucleus to Christianity, and it is this nucleus that liberals seek to eviscerate, oftentimes for reasons that have nothing to do with refining or deepening the faith, but everything to do with making concessions to modern modes of thought. Don't believe me? Consider hell. Historically, the overwhelming majority of Christians believed in hell as a place of fiery torment, literal or figurative, perhaps both, in which the unrepentant would spend all eternity wailing and gnashing their teeth. Yet this strikes us moderns as cruel and unjust, even evil. So while the conservative will simply bite the bullet and defer to the unknowable wisdom of God, his ways are not our ways after all, the liberal will set out to radically reinvent or even jettison the concept altogether. Those who opt for the latter, jettisoning the concept, can rightfully be called heretics by their more orthodox brethren, because they are people who display such uncritical contempt for historical consensus that they ought to be dismissed as unserious believers, which they invariably are. Those who opt for the former strategy, reinvention, will proceed in a more subtle but still disingenuous manner. Believers belonging to this camp will typically comb through the annals of church history and find some dissenting minority voices, such as Gregory of Nyssa or Isaac the Syrian, and Origen, and then unduly privilege these voices, or rather, strands of their theology, above and beyond the outstanding majority of other church fathers, or even conciliar decrees. Of course, I do not think that adopting a minority position necessarily means that someone is insincere or inconsistent. People are diverse and disagreement is to be expected, after all. However, it is the driving impulse to seek out unorthodox views, particularly those views wholly contrary to orthodox ones, that I question. Liberals do not become universalists with respect to heaven and hell because they find the arguments for universalism compelling on theological grounds. They do so because their moral framework is shaped far more by people such as John Locke and John Rawls than St. Augustine and St. Paul, even if they cannot admit this to themselves. However, the most pronounced difference between liberals and conservatives is not which historical figures they champion, but their hermeneutical approach, their interpretive strategy to the Bible. The foundational question guiding the liberal hermeneutic is not what did the authors mean, nor is it what did the communal body of believers exegete from the text, but rather, how can this mess be salvaged and made consonant with contemporary mores? The text is divested of any meaning it could have carried within itself, as well as any meaning imbued upon it by history. It becomes a blank canvas onto which the reigning prejudices of the new dispensations may be projected, an empty vessel for the reader's own desire. It is a hermeneutic of violence, historical, textual, even spiritual. I am an agnostic, but I recognize in the Bible much that is grand and ancient and beautiful, even if I no longer find its claims wholly convincing. But I also object to what I see as a cynical appropriation. All that is forgivable, though. We are circumscribed by our own historical context, our own intellectual horizons, our own private experience. Eisegesis is not a four-letter word, and there can be no act of reading a text without a concomitant act of personal interpretation and personal meaning-making. What is not forgivable, however, is going about this process in a transparently frivolous way, and doing so, if you'll pardon the pun, in bad faith. I'm sure I will catch flack for saying this, but nowhere is this casuistry more evident than with the liberal approach to homosexuality in the Bible. Amazingly, just as the Geist of the age comes out in favor of sexual emancipation for gays, all of a sudden, liberal denominations such as Episcopalians discover in the text of Scripture justifications for homogenital acts, which, mystery of mysteries, eluded Christians for almost 2 millennia. Sodom and Gomorrah becomes a cautionary tale not about sodomy, but about inhospitality, as if one precludes the other. St. Paul's injunction against gay sex becomes a rather peculiar and specific prohibition against ritualized temple prostitution. The Levitical command to execute gays is, well, let's just not talk about that. David and Jonathan become partners, as do Ruth and Naomi. Even Christ prefigures this massive anthropological shift when he offers his benediction to the Roman centurion and his injured male servant/lover. It's all so stupid and on so many levels. If you believe in the deepest recesses of your heart that Jesus would favor gay marriage, a practice unheard of even in the post-Christian, post-Enlightenment West until less than 2 decades ago, then I have a fucking bridge to sell you. No one who has any respect for the text or history would be making these claims, yet they are depressingly common among liberals. No one who genuinely feared and the descending hand of God would say shit that goofy. Conservatives and fundamentalists say and do dumb things, but one thing they never do is treat their faith as some plaything to be shaped and molded by fashionable hegemonic opinions. Only someone who has reduced Christianity to a merely progressive ethical project and God to some abstract principle who grounds such a project would entertain these thoughts, much less argue them. This is a counterfeit spirituality. No one buys it, and the writing is on the wall. Just look at the collapsing demographics of liberal denominations. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I am convinced that theological liberals should just come out of the closet already. What is the point of maintaining this outer shell of incense, statements of faith, hymns, and pretty buildings, when, if we scratch the surface, we find just another Westerner who does not truly believe? Why not just accept that for Western man, Christianity has run its course? Why don't liberals just acknowledge what I suspect they know in their hearts to be true, that Christianity has ceased to provide meaningful answers, and that by dressing up modern answers, which are also proving to be meaningless, in Christian garb and vice versa, they just prolong our state of psycho-spiritual exhaustion? I'm begging you, cut the bullshit. Be authentic, even if it is terrifying. End quote. So there you have it. Those were the words of Will to Power. I hope that you'll give them some consideration, and I hope that you will participate in the comments under this video. Because these are not my words, I don't intend to sort of weigh in and defend every jot and tittle here, but I expect I will participate in the comments. So feel free to join in the conversation. And I'd like to thank Will to Power for giving me the permission to read his words here and share them with you. I hope they'll be of some help to you and thought-provoking. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen. Cheers.